This is the next video in the Question Everything series that up until now has 8 videos, starting with the introduction and carrying on up until 6. Part 5 has an A and a B, and I would like you to go and watch the series if you can before you even watch this video. It is important that you put the entire puzzle together over time. And even if you don't watch those videos before you finish this, please go and watch them from beginning to end. This is very important if you actually care about understanding what is happening in South Africa and what is happening in the world. In this video, in the Question Everything series, you will see that I will always wear the same shirt. So when I'm wearing the shirt, you're watching a Question Everything video. And this series forms the crux of my personal experience with regards to how I see how we do things in South Africa. In other words, I would have either had personal experience, hands-on contact, seen with my own eyes what is happening. Because the content I put out on Double O Des is either verifiable news articles or something that I experienced myself. You are not going to get content that comes from anyone else, that's pillaged from another YouTube channel, as many other people do. This is original and gut-wrenching stuff based on my own life and my own life experiences. And to me, this next topic is extremely important. And it's not just a topic, but a whole concept that I want to share with you. As many of you know that have gone through my channel, that I was a nuclear professional, still am a nuclear professional since 1992. And in my time at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, I got used to and got trained in what a nuclear safety culture is. And not just a nuclear safety culture, but a culture overall of excellence. And to achieve this culture wherein nuclear energy can be used safely, there's a lot of training and a lot of testing involved. And I've spoken about this at length in part 5A, B, and part 6, and how this relates to our political system. And I want to bring this into this entire COVID-19 pandemic that we are experiencing at the moment. And I'm going to tell you how I would have handled it based on my experience that I gained within the nuclear industry. And people, this is not rocket science. I believe that the best world practices that actually work should be employed throughout the world where we can. It shouldn't be kept a secret. And when I worked at Koeberg on shift in the operations department, running the nuclear reactor and all the auxiliary systems, we were often called the Twilight People. And the reason we were called that is because many of the staff on the station hardly ever saw us, because we worked our 8-hour shifts. There's 3 shifts in a day, and we were on a 6-week shift roster, of which one of those weeks included a full training week and another week included a full spares week. So every 6 weeks we received a full week of training for the rest of my time at Koeberg, unless you were on a formal training course, of which there were many over the time that I was there. Years worth of training courses to prepare me for the work that I needed to do. And I want to transfer the skills into our government. And the reason why I want to do that is because our current system and governance system is completely and utterly incompetent. It's not world's best practice. And that's why I know that this system has been set up deliberately, because we do have all this advanced knowledge, but we're not using it. Why is that? We need to question these things. And in Question Everything, question I will. And I will also explain many things to you, and hopefully if you listen to me, subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon for notifications, and actually watch the videos from beginning to end, you will learn a lot, because I have learned a lot. And I didn't learn this by myself. I was taught by excellent, brilliant people. People that actually cared not only about nuclear safety, but people that cared about the country, people that cared about people, and cared about people's improvement. And I want to transfer this knowledge to the South African base of people, not the politicians. I want them to apply the knowledge that I've learned in politics, in governance, and in the way that we actually sustain a civilization within this country. And the first thing that I want to explain is how decisions are made at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station. There is a top-down structure at Koeberg, but the people right at the bottom are trained extensively. So if you empower the people at the lowest level within any organization, those people can govern themselves. And this is crucial to understand the liberty and the freedom that the people at Koeberg are given to do their work, perform their work as skilled employees. They are excessively skilled compared to what you have in the normal industry outside of the nuclear industry. And one might say that it's excessive training yourself for an entire week every 6 weeks, but in the nuclear industry it is necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And it's very important to understand that within our political realm the same thing should apply, that we should come up with a system and a way of doing things that mirror the best world practice. And the best world practice you will find in the nuclear industry, in the space and aeronautics industry, and in the aviation industry. Those industries, I know there's a few others that I'm not mentioning now that are smaller, but probably operate at the same level, but not at the same, on the same scale. There are hundreds of thousands of people across the world employed within the nuclear industry and can take those skills into society. Now let's get back to the COVID-19 pandemic. At Koeberg there's different groups of people that sit and counsel with each other and make decisions. And it's very important to understand that this is structured in a very specific way, and that various people get involved in these discussions. Now, these different levels of discussions are crucial to understand where our government goes wrong. So you have the highest level of decision making, where there is a chairman, that it's not a democracy, there's no votes that take place. That chairman makes the final decision, and he has a council of all the department heads that sit within this council, and he counsels with them, gets information from them. Experts gets called into those meetings to explain certain things to them. They have lots of things on the agenda that actually look at issues that needs to be addressed or future possible problems. And what they do is they have serious discussions where everyone around the table can give input. And not only give input, but try and influence the decision that the chairman makes at the end of the day. Now, if the COVID-19 pandemic had to arrive at Koeberg and all of a sudden they need to make decisions for the country, it would go something like this. And I can guarantee you this is not what our South African government did. The chairman, who would be the president of the country, would assemble the top team of people that have been highly trained, highly skilled, have spent years gaining experience after being qualified and skilled and tested and qualified outside of Koeberg before they were qualified at Koeberg. That would be the cabinet. Then the cabinet and the president or the chair and the seniors within this council would call in experts to bring evidence before them for this problem or pandemic. And what that would mean is that they would get people from South Africa, their own country, within their own organization, to come to them and present evidence to them for this problem. Because obviously this problem would have been highlighted from these experts to begin with. Then the chair and the people of this council would have to be convinced first that there is an issue that needs attention. And this would have been vetted before it even reached the council. So if this vetting did not take place, nothing would come to the council to begin with. So when this issue does come to the council, they have decided to hear the issue. So there needs to be quite a bit of merit that there is a problem. Now, in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it would be very easy to get something such as this on the agenda because of what the rest of the world would have said with regards to this pandemic breaking out in China, for instance. I'm just using examples now. I'm not saying that is exactly what happened. And then started spreading throughout the world. The first thing they would want to know is what is the credible threat to us? What is the time frame for that threat? And then find out whether they need to address it immediately. So the first thing they would want to know is give evidence of the fact that this threat is imminent. So once that evidence is provided, and it needs to be hard evidence that they will debate and discuss and get experts in to give them advice on. And remember, these are highly skilled and trained people already. So you can't take them for a ride. They have knowledge. An expert can't come there and make and pull the wool over their eyes. These people know what they're talking about. They are highly skilled and qualified, most of them, or many of them, within the field of expertise that this person bringing the evidence is in, because his department head will actually be there, and that department head, which would be a minister, would actually know that department backwards, as well as the work within that department, because they would have done it before themselves and grown through the ranks, something that our government knows nothing about. So the first thing that they would do is there a real threat? So where would this COVID-19 pandemic fare in a meeting like this? Where would the seriousness be placed? And the first thing they would want to see is, if this person brings evidence of a virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, they would want evidence of that. So show us this virus. Show it to us. Prove to us this virus exists, that there is a credible threat. And right then and there is where they would have their first problem. Because if this person cannot prove to them that the virus exists, they would not continue, that there is a credible threat. You would then have to raise probable cause that this threat is viable. What they will consider then is mitigating actions. What can we do besides taking actions that proves that this virus is real? What can we do to mitigate it if it should be real? Then evidence needs to be brought before this council to prove that they should actually act now, although we cannot give evidence of this specific thing. And this does happen sometimes. There could be a possible threat in future, because most threats with regards to nuclear and the reactor and the core safety revolves around possibilities, highly improbable things. And yet, there are billions spent on systems to try and mitigate things that might never ever happen in the history of the nuclear industry. So this is a good thing. This is ultra-conservative, and conservatism is part of the game within the nuclear industry. And certainly it should be in government too, especially if you want to change the way we live in society. They will take this highly seriously. So what these people would have to do that bring evidence is prove that you would need to mitigate without a chance of the problem actually happening. And this is possible. So you need to bring evidence and say, if this virus is really as bad as they say, and it really does exist, and it comes here, this will be the consequences. And then you would have to prove the consequences. This will be another test that our government would fail, because they cannot prove the consequences of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Because this consequence cannot be someone said so many people died from a disease, because the first thing you would be asked is prove this disease exists. And how will anyone at this stage prove that COVID-19 exists if we cannot define what it is? If we haven't done proper autopsies across the world to actually understand what it means, that everything is based on a positive test. It would be the same at Kubik as saying, oh, we have seen that the pipe is thinning over time because of impingement on the metal or whatever the case might be, and because of this thinning, we might have a future problem where the pipe might rupture, when it could take another 50 years for the pipe to get to the point where it ruptures. So you need to say that there is now an imminent threat. And if you cannot prove that, your case falls apart and it will not pass the committee, and the chair is not going to make any decision. You'll get chased out, in fact. So, to get back to the proof and the burden of proof. So, firstly, they would have to prove that there is a threat. Prove that the virus exists. If you cannot bring this proof, you would have to prove that there is a credible threat. That it's possible that if the virus is real, that it could cause COVID-19. Here, there would be another breakdown, because no one in our government has been able to tell us that firstly, that initially now, that they have isolated this virus, they've looked at it under a microscope and they're verifying everything that the international community might be saying or not saying, and prove themselves that there's a credible threat. The second thing you would have to do, if you can't provide that proof, which wasn't available in this case, that there is a real disease. Now, what you can do is say, listen here, there is a disease, we don't know what it is, we don't understand it at this stage, and we should take action to stop the spread of this virus. In which case, the committee or the council would ask you, but prove that it's being spread, and that exactly the same thing is appearing in other places in the world. Now you have to try and provide proof that it's exactly the same thing that's appearing in other places. In other words, at Koeberg would be the same as saying that we've got this fungus growing within the water at all the different water systems at Koeberg. They would want you to prove it's the same fungus. You would have to take samples of the water, do an analysis, and then bring the results of that analysis. And they will believe you. They might question your results, actually look at it and say, listen here, I don't think you did your test correctly. So you will be questioned extensively. And if you cannot prove that the same thing has gone everywhere in the world, your case falls apart for Koeberg now taking action to actually stop the spread of something that you can't prove exists. You can't prove that it causes the effect that you say that it's causing, and then you can't prove that it's actually going to affect you. So those are three things with which the South African government have failed and would not have passed the council or the committee. The very next thing, at this stage, at Koeberg, it'll be thrown out. In other words, it wouldn't even go further. Say now you do prove that the same problem is going to come to Koeberg, and you are scrutinized, you are questioned, and the council is convinced that you have a credible threat. The next thing that will happen then is you'll be asked, how do we address the threat? And the first thing that the experts would say is that we need to mitigate immediately, and they would have had to come with a strategic action plan already. A plan that's laid out perfectly. Otherwise, the committee wouldn't entertain it. So when you come there, you need to be prepared and you need to know what you're talking about. So when this person or persons come to the committee and have their time to present their evidence and their case, that would be further scrutinized, this plan that you come up with. And you might be told to leave and come up with something better. They could rip your plan apart. So they are not going to entertain anything that hasn't been well thought out, because they are experts themselves. They have a broad range of knowledge. Because you're sitting with a council of people that have already done the work of the people presenting something to you. For instance, the Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, he would have been an expert doctor, would have studied many different things in a broad field within medicine, and he would be able to ask relevant questions of these people. What would have not happened is that another organization that is not part of the South African nuclear industry could just waltz into a meeting like that and dictate to that council what should happen. Enters the World Health Organization. The Koeberg Council will work with other organizations around the world if they've gathered evidence around something. But they will be invited to that council, and the people in the council will then scrutinize them and will then question their motives. They will question what they are trying to propose, and they will then decide themselves whether this is to be believed, whether this is a threat, and the decision will be made within the council. And the chair of that council, which is the President of South Africa, will make the final decision, because he will be a person elected after many years of experience within the organization, or in this case within the country, to represent the entire organization within that meeting. And it will be the most senior person on the power station. And everyone will respect that person. Most people will respect that person. The majority of people will respect that person because they will know that they can make proper decisions. This is certainly not the case within South Africa, and we need to change the system so that we can fix this desperately.